Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of HR Voices podcast. I am your host, Mary Asante, and with me here is the lovely Mike Pagan. Hi, Mike.
Hey there, good to be here again, Mary. Excited as always.
Great to have you back, and I'm extremely excited, Mike, that you could join us again today, and super excited. When you previously joined us, we talked, and that was episode 57. And I would encourage people to go and listen to it because that was one of our most listened to episodes of all times. And there's a reason why, because we really sort of got into the nitty-gritty of mental wealth and the value, etc. And I saw the phrase, your very last statement in that episode stuck with me, which is pick up the phone. Don't text, don't whatever, but pick up the phone and check on people. And so that was incredibly sort of important, and it was a conversation that resonated with our audience, particularly our independent consultants and leaders who carry out a lot of work quietly and in the spaces of their own home. I think generally anyway, loads of people all around work from home from time to time, if not all the time. Hybrid working is the new norm. And sometimes people just get on with it and just in the quiet of their either the space of their home offices, etc. So it's a really important topic. And this time we are picking up where that conversation left off. Okay, so I'll hand over to Mike to remind us again of who he is. And just for those who are tuning in or making Mike for the first time, you'll be able to understand a bit more about Mike's background and what he does and what makes him the perfect person to speak to on this subject.
Thank you very much, Mary. That's too kind. Excellent. I'm pleased to be back, Mary, because when we talked before, the focus was very much on introducing mental wealth and what that was. And for me, just for those who've not listened to that episode, number 57, the focus there is on about having the right support network around us that's fit for purpose for the way forward. And in this industry, in this HR industry, where majority of you that are listening are based within, we are brilliant at fixing everybody else's problems and challenges, but not necessarily great at looking after number one. And so the whole elements around mental wealth is about that yin to the yang, where negative mental health takes us down a spiral of challenges, depression and problems and work that goes with that. Whereas positive mental wealth means we've got brilliant people around us asking better questions than we can ask of ourselves, reaching out and holding us accountable for the things we say we're going to do and helping us achieve more, both personally and professionally. And I was overseas recently, and one of the people in the audience really struggled with the comprehension of this holistic approach to looking after number one, because they had a professional mindset and they had a personal mindset, and these two individuals did not meet each other. It was really quite frightening, and I described it because I used to do this in my corporate life, where I would be almost schizophrenic. So two different personalities. There'd be the professional at work, and there'd be Mike out with the family in the evening. And this holistic element, when we are doing the stuff that's right and we've got good people around us, then both our personal and professional lives, we become more successful. We achieve more because we've got good people around us. So it's not, you can't separate the two, I believe. We need to be looking after number one, which means we can then achieve our performance, productivity, family life, everything else improves because we're taking a proactive approach to looking after it.
Yeah, and I think you are absolutely right there, Mike, because there's lots of talk around bringing your whole self or your full self or your authentic self to work. And where you have a clear separation of this is me, this is the professional Mary, and
Mm.
hey, this is the personal Mary, or this is me when I'm expected to be professional and stiff and
And
whatever.
that's the mask.
And I think that drains a lot of positive energy out of people
Mm.
because occasionally, and sometimes people do slip and forget what mask they're effectively wearing, isn't it?
Yeah,
And then suddenly people go, oh, that's out of character. Or that is not Mary. What's going on here? And
yeah.
so, yeah.
It's scary reality. We've all done it at times. And nowadays with the influx of AI and everything else going on, the CV and the introductory letter for a job application that looks absolutely nothing like the individual who turns up. It's I I mean, we all use AI in different things to proofread or to research, but it's when you turn around and said, I had to teach it, don't use words with 3 or 4 syllables because that's not how I speak. It's sort of, come on, there are people who know you know the language that you use. They know the way you work. So, and this is the HR is human responsibility. It's human resources. It's the humanity edge that is so important. And when we become human, that's what makes us unique. And when we
Absolutely.
and whether it be business to business transactions or business to consumer or internal within an organization, that whole thing of without the level of humanity, we're just a robot, and we have to keep that edge in there because it makes such a difference. Makes life so much more interesting because you do strange activities at the weekend. Well, they're strange because to me because I don't get excited by them, but you do, and vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of on that element, there are so many aspects to that in terms of mental wealth, mental health, and our general well-being. I
Mm,
think one of the key concepts that we are going to explore today is this whole idea of you are closer than you think
mm.
because I think sort of as you clearly outlined before we came online, and I hope when I hand over to you, you can explain to people what that actually means. But people are already aware, okay, of what they need, or they may be, most people are, not all people, but most people are aware of what they need, right? And they are not disconnected from the solutions necessarily, but they are disconnected from action.
Just yeah, totally. And it's knowing that there are times when we're all guilty of working below our pay grade, for example, because nobody else can do it as well as we do, so we do it. But
Yeah.
actually, so we've got all the knowledge, got all the skills, but we're not empowering other people to do it. And then that takes us into that spiral of sort of where, because we're becoming a bit of a control freak potentially, or we believe we're the best, then we land up isolating ourselves from everybody else around because they can't relate to you. I remember that when I was first in the speaking world, one of the challenges I had, which so many have when it comes from a corporate background of presenting, you'd
Mm,
point at some PowerPoint slides with lots of bullet points and text, and you'd have
yeah.
this deep voice and a furrowed brow and a pointy finger.
Mhm.
And it was all sort of that was the acceptance of what professional looked like, but it wasn't. And you have all the answers if you're on stage because you have to have all the answers, otherwise you shouldn't be there. But if you've got all the answers, The people in the room haven't got all the answers, so they therefore can't relate to you. Because perfect Peter has no friends because nobody can relate to perfect Peter. Well,
Yeah. And I think that is a really interesting and important point, and maybe a point that a lot of HR professionals can relate to, for slightly different reasons, because traditionally HR seemed to be this person, this department, this function that people go to initially, mostly when there are problems, right? There's
yes,
disciplinary, my employees and performing, I need to recruit, I'm struggling to recruit, and all those sorts of things. So HR mostly, for most people, comes to mind and is synonymous to dealing with very, very difficult, complex issues.
yes,
And for that reason, it can be quite a lonely place, especially for independent consultants who goes in and who help resolve and solve these challenges. And so I think the idea of when you're showing up, you need to be or demonstrate a certain level of professionalism, which is almost comparable to you talking about being on stage, having these bulleted points, speaking and pointing in a certain manner, because that's what's expected of you.
mm,
But in reality, that is not what HR stands for or should stand for. And that's not what an independent consultant or how an independent consultant should be like, because you need to understand the organization, your clients, the culture, the environment, and everything. And you need to be relatable to that environment as much as they are, or your clients and the employees have to be able to relate to you.
yeah.
So,
And that's the nature of the industry because so much of the work involves troubleshooting.
yeah,
Yeah. And troubleshooting, which can frustrate because it's preventing people from making mistakes or it's cleaning up after people have made mistakes. And
yeah,
and that makes it very challenging. And that can create an environment where of isolation. Which and one of the hardest parts here is that when we talk about isolation, there's intentional isolation and there's unintentional. Now, the intentional is when I take myself off to a private office. I want to be separate. I've got to deal with some challenges. I've got to deal with some reviews, some changes in headcount or whatever elements. So I don't want to be disturbed. So I need professional, confidential isolation. But
yeah,
then the flip side of that is the unintentional isolation. And that comes from the hybrid working world that we're in nowadays
yeah,
where we are working 3 and 2, 2 and 3, whatever it is, from a remote environment, be that home office, co-working office, or wherever we happen to be. The number of people who don't live in cities nowadays because they want the quality of life and vice versa. But it's the scary part is when you look at the 20 somethings, the 30 something worker who is in a remote space, unintentionally cut off from the learning environment around them. Now, that's not to say that I believe hybrid working is wrong. I just believe that going forward, we need to be proactive in the management of the unintentional isolation of our workforce.
absolutely. And I think that is a huge issue for, or a huge challenge for most organizations
Mhm.
because, okay, the unintentional isolation, of course, I am a big fan. And if you look at some of my previous blogs, training, etc., that I've done, I've been a huge advocate of hybrid working.
Mhm.
However, as you've highlighted, one of the key challenges is this unintentional isolation and the impact on the mental health of some individuals sometimes as a result of either working in isolation, working in the same space and from home, and being constrained or restricted to one space and whatever. And sometimes the inability to separate the home work life.
Yes. That's such a fascinating space because it takes me back to during COVID, during the lockdowns, and
Mm.
you'd see those random things popping up on whatever social media you happen to be looking at, where there'd be the mum with three children under the age of 8 trying to homeschool those three people in a high-rise flat where nobody's been out for several days, and that isolation that just was intense. And nowadays, whilst that if that's sort of like the 11 out of 10 for intense isolation and cut off and challenge, how can you have a professional mindset? How could that mother continue to work with that going on in the background the whole time and still be constructive and still be able to hold it's so difficult, but everything coming back in from that, if that's sort of the right off the top end of the scale, then we've got, I always tell the story of my daughter as doing a placement as the university, and there she was in a student house where nobody else got up until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah, and it's you're trying to be professional, but how can you be professional when your surroundings are very amateur? And so it's some people in the olden days would say, well, if you work from home, if you're a gentleman, and you would still put a tie on, no, and go to work. Okay, that might be a bit extreme and a bit out of date, but the principle is actually one that still needs to be considered as to how do we set our state so that we can be professional. And then how do we break that state and separate it so we're not sitting there at 10 o'clock at night with the laptop on our lap, not talking to our partners, not talking to our children, still trying to work with the TV on in the background. This is an echo chamber of never switching off, which leads to burnout, which leads to overwhelm. And some of that is back to what we were saying a few moments ago about us working below our pay grade because we don't trust anybody else to do it anyway. So I'll just do it anyhow because I've got the cape on over my shoulders and the pants on the outside of my trousers because I'm a
Yeah.
superhero. I can do it all. Yeah,
Yeah,
that much.
it's a really interesting point to discuss. And it's got so many different angles to it. And I'm going to share my personal perspective because
Mm,
at the beginning of the recording, you actually saw my daughter come in here. And then we paused for a minute whilst I helped her a bit. And a little bit of the story, most people who maybe either know me or been following my post or who I am, etc., would know that I have got a daughter who has got autism, ADHD, communication challenges, etc., and is currently out of school and has been out of school since April 2024. And so the COVID moment for most people where, oh, we had to educate our child and work and do whatever at the same time is so effectively my reality. And it's even a bit more complex because of her special educational needs.
yeah.
Because when she has a tutor come in, I need to be a hand to support the tutor who may not necessarily know how to deal and to support her fully. So it's extremely challenging. And on top of that, that leads to a special isolation for her as an individual and for me as a parent as well.
Mm,
And
definitely.
although much of what I do is supporting community, supporting other people to run effectively and successfully run their businesses, etc., there are clear restrictions. And the reality is, I can't go out to networking events. I can't go out and see people. I can't go out and see clients sometimes in the same way as if I didn't have those challenges in my personal life. I could easily, because at her age, she would have been totally independent and I could just leave her and go. But
Mm.
that's just not the case. And
Yeah.
so that there is that element of it. And one aspect, because it affects me personally, that I'm really passionate about and doesn't get discussed in the workplace enough, is the impact of special educational challenges on
Mm.
parents who are carers.
And this is one of the most sensitive subjects that
Yeah,
HR has to deal with,
yeah.
because it's about performance, yes,
Mm,
but it's also about respecting the challenges of everybody else around you. And it unfortunately the all too often there's a cynical viewpoint that everybody starts with the lowest denominator, that they're all trying to skive, they're all taking duvet days, they're all of that sort of negative. And we know there's a percentage of a workforce that will extract or extend and take the mickey. We know that. But the reality is, too many organizations historically have tarred everybody by that same environment, or got that whole thing. And we need to have that understanding. And that's about asking the better questions. It's putting the human element in there again, because we're not robots. And
no.
that means that we all have our challenges, be they personal, be they physical, be they health, whatever it is. And it's by getting the openness and the honesty, as business leaders, as graduate interns, as C-suite executives, we
Mm.
are then empowering others to help us and support us. Because you're being that vulnerable and open, and that makes it powerful because it's real.
And I think on that topic, because we're talking about mental health and the impact of people's mental state on
Yeah.
their work, on their lives, etc., I think I would like to use this opportunity to really remind people the importance of all of us having a muscle memory around how we felt like during COVID days
Yeah,
when we were on lockdown and so many people felt helpless,
absolutely.
isolated, and effectively really struggled to be productive. I think it's important for us to remember that some people still face these challenges.
Mm, yes,
And there are even flashbacks for some people as well. So we just need to be really empathetic. We just
mm.
really need to understand who is in our team, who we are working with, what type of challenges that they may be facing, to really be able to support them when they need that support.
And I want to add in the the first part of this back into the equation,
Mm,
because that is about the professional delivery.
yeah,
That's what we need to be aware of. That's what we need to be respectful of, because we don't know what's going on. Yeah, but
yeah,
one of my wife's former aging clients always described, you got to be a fly on the wall to know it all. Yeah, we know that. We don't know what's going on in other people's worlds unless we ask. But going back one step, but for to enable us to be in a powerful position where we can help those that need it, then we need to be in a fit place already, whether that be fit physically, mentally, spiritually, nutritionally, all of those elements. And so that means we have to look after number one.
yeah.
And by looking after number one, that enables us to have the strength,
Mm,
the capability to go. And it's not necessarily about, I know when we were talking online beforehand, it's not necessarily about having more qualifications.
yeah.
Because I remember years ago, one of my mentor coach friends turned around and said, Mike, when are you going to stop learning and start doing?
Mm.
Yeah. Just having another badge, another set of letters isn't going to change your approach. It's not
Yeah.
going to make you more billable. It's not going to make you more attractive. It's not going to, it's just more learning. Now, the flip on that is obviously the day we stop learning is the day where they put us in a box.
Yeah.
So we do learn every day, but it's that thing of when we're focused on the areas that matter, we already have the lion's share of the answers,
Yeah.
which goes back to this whole subject of we're closer
Mm.
than we think we are, or you're
Yeah.
closer than you think you are, because we're there. And just that, I'm not quite sure how to deal with X, Y, or Z. Fine, you ask for help. But the rest of the time, we're getting on with it. We've got people around us. We're dealing with a support, not doing it in isolation. And that stops us from drifting and just existing. One of a great speaker friend of mine used to refer to this as an NLE. Yeah, are you having a near life experience?
Right.
And that because you're waiting for something to happen.
Mm.
Stop waiting for permission, and we
Yeah.
get on with it. But that can only happen if we've looked after number one, so that we're fit for purpose going forward.
Excellent. And on that note, there's this concept of drift.
Yeah.
How does the drift actually look like? What is it?
The drift for me is that it's just not taking ownership and responsibility.
Mm.
We sort of, so back to not delegating, but the other side of that is, well, when you're just bumbling along and you're waiting for others to give you the green light.
Mm.
Now, clearly there are situations where we have to have something verified. We have to have a rubber stamp. I totally get that. But if we live our lives with the handbrake on, then you're not
Mm.
going to go forward very far.
Right.
It's always going to be hard work. It's always going to be a challenge. And it means
Mm.
that you start drifting through whichever way the current will take you, rather than you intentionally pushing forward.
Yeah.
And if we're intentionally choosing our direction, taking ownership for our successes and our failures, then we learn along the way. We build the right people around us. That gives us very positive mental wealth because we've got wonderful things happening. And it means that we are fit. I was coaching a client this morning, and one of their challenges, and this is a C-suite finance director, and her major issue was just that whole setup of how she built her daily routines, which were in her control rather than everybody else's, to
Mm.
the point 14 appointments booked in her diary by a secretary with no time between any of them.
Yeah.
And just that's amateur. And it has a negative impact because she's knackered, she's burned out, she's not fit for purpose, she wants to leave, and it's all going wrong. Well,
Mm.
that's the negative impact of when we don't take control. So she's drifting into this isolated world of hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
It's the empowerment bit. We've got to take control.
Yeah. I think you have nailed it right there, Mike. And that links directly next to my next question, which is effectively, why do very capable and very talented people drift?
Because we get caught up being busy. One of the best buttons that was ever invented was the pause button.
Mm.
Yeah, it's whether you're a fan of the 5 a.m. club and doing the 20 minutes of planning, 20 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes of exercise. If that works for you, then great. Most people it doesn't, because it's far too early. But it's what are your daily disciplines, so you know that you're actually in control of what's working, because the capability is there, the intelligence is there, the knowledge, the history, the experience, but we just go through the motions and drift along because we're waiting for somebody else to give us that green light.
Mm.
But actually, when we know we're working, bring in good old purpose. Now that when we know we're working and doing what we love, we make braver
Yeah.
decisions faster. We get on with it, and it's that when we are procrastinating and drifting, we stop making decisions. And not making a decision is a decision to accept the status quo and not go forward.
Are there any signs that people can actually spot when they are drifting, or are there any triggers that people can recognize when they start to drift?
The first one is the inability to make a decision.
Mm.
Whether that be, okay, so how have you progressed with project X? Well, that was 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago, and we haven't moved forward. How are we doing it? So the inability to make a decision implies procrastination, navel gazing, whatever language fits, to actually avoid the decision that is necessary to make a positive step forward, or to cut off the limb that needs to go, or everything in between. So without making decisions, that makes an impact. And one of the things I've challenged the clients I've coached in a one-to-one environment is about, okay, I want you on a weekly basis to track the number of decisions you make.
Mm.
And it's just a little gate chart. It's no science behind it. And suddenly they start looking through the lens of, wow, I make a lot of decisions. And I'm not talking about should I have a coffee or shouldn't I have a coffee?
Those are very important
At
decisions.
different times of the day, but more important than others. But that reality of, okay, I've made X number of decisions this week, and how do you feel? Well, I feel like I've got closure on lots of things. I feel like I've made massive progress on lots of areas. My accountability buddy, my accountability peer group, I was turning around and saying, wow, Mike, you're doing so much at the moment because there's those ticks in boxes. I've made decisions versus having a matrix staring at you from the computer every day, and you've not got to tick in any of the boxes because I haven't made a decision for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that actually leads nicely into our next discussion, which is around awareness trap. Because
Yes.
let's face it, awareness is not necessarily the same as change. And knowing isn't the same as doing.
Correct.
As much as, okay, insight without action becomes frustration. If you are aware, and you don't do anything about it, you end up frustrating yourself and people around you, right? So sometimes people don't need more information. They potentially need interruption, don't they? So
Well,
yeah.
that interruption, if you look at health as one example of that, that interruption comes from a health scare.
Mm.
Which is, I mean, we can throw in alcohol and cigarettes as the obvious, but there's more to it than that. So that awareness piece comes when something resets, or there's an alarm bell.
Yeah.
But then the flip side of that is the awareness of knowing, actually, I know when I do this and this, I'm more productive.
Yeah.
I know when I ask for help. I know when I have an accountability partner. I know when I bring in a mentor. Okay, I've always had a coach. I've never had a coach. All of these things, the awareness of what we do when we have the parameters set correctly around us for our own performance.
Mm.
And I know when because of my personal skill sets that I have, I know full well I've had a number of coaches that I've been able to feed the lines I think they want to hear, which implies I'm doing more than I'm doing. Well, what's the point in having the coach in the first place if you're just going to lie to them? And
Yeah.
that's so it's an awareness piece that coach isn't asking poignant enough questions. That individual. And so within business, be that as individuals, leaders, C-suite, whatever our particular title is having those accountability people around us who are going to call us out for the things we say we're doing but are not doing.
Yeah.
They can smell the BS that is coming from you when you're not doing it. And that's the awareness piece. But
Yeah.
if you're not empowering other people to do that, then you will continue to blindly go along, because if nobody's calling you out and you're getting away with it, then you're existing, you're not living.
And I think the same thing can also, I mean, apply when you are surrounded by yes people, right?
Oh, yes,
If you're
totally.
surrounded by people who wouldn't not even necessarily call you out, but constructively challenge you, then you wouldn't necessarily, yes, you'd definitely not be held accountable, but you wouldn't necessarily know when things may not be going as well as you think they are.
Yeah. And that's down to our ability to take feedback, our ability to and empower people to provide that necessary challenge. Because just because I think it's blue doesn't
Yeah.
mean to say it's not teal. Doesn't mean to, it's still a type of blue, but it's not the blue that the other person was considering.
Mm.
And that only comes by appreciating and being aware. And it's easy to say things like that, yeah, there's many different tones and pantones and everything. But in our performance, are we empowering other people to call us out when we are not as aware of our our impact, be that positive or negative?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, linking back to episode 57 and focusing on isolation and avoidance
Mm,
generally, why do leaders become harder to reach when they need support the most?
good question. I like that one because it's that balance between the self-importance
Hmm.
and therefore I am the big person, I am the whatever else, so nobody should come near me, versus actually the humility that is necessary of the true leaders. And it's not about we all have to become a truly open, vulnerable, empathetic leader, but we have to be able to understand that the people around need different types of input.
Hmm.
And some need a stroke, some need a kick, some
Hmm.
need a different form of incentive. But it's if we have only one way of working, then you're going to be surrounded by yes people or people that are too afraid to confront and challenge. So we,
Yeah.
we need to appreciate that. And that gives us scope and vulnerability and access to unlocking both our power and our strength, but those around us, because the sum of many parts is not just one plus.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also the element of the leaders themselves. It's not a weakness to ask for help. It's actually a strength. And
Totally.
I think it's a strength that a lot of leaders don't tap into because this whole mindset of I'm at the lead, I'm at the person at the top of the pyramid, I'm the one that people look up to. So how can I be perceived as weak? How can I be perceived as I need help? How can I be perceived as or even seen to be asking for help? And that,
It's that negative positioning of isolation.
yeah,
When you're the leader, you can't tell shareholders you don't know the answers
yeah,
because they'll lose faith in you. You can't
uh-huh,
tell your co-directors you don't know the answers because they'll use it against you at a future point. Your
yeah,
husband or wife or partner hasn't got a clue what you do, but they'll always say yes. Your friends at the school gate, at the sport or whatever it is, will always say, go for it, Mike, because you'll always land on your feet. And you can't tell your staff, your employees, and the downline that you don't know the answers because they're reliant on you knowing the answers because, as a direct or indirect result of you being successful, they get to pay their mortgage or their rent and live where they want to. Uh,
yeah,
and that's what happens in true leadership isolation. You haven't got anybody that can actually answer or ask the questions that you need to be working with because you're so afraid of all of those parameters around you backfiring.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that again sort of reminds me of the emotional workload that leaders carry, the emotional workload that HR professionals, HR consultants, etc., carry, that people don't even realize that they carry those loads. And
Hmm.
actually, it's easier when you're not there to just go, oh, this is just above my pay grade and that's not just for me. Or actually, even when people notice, sometimes you get, well, that's why they get paid enough. or that's why they get paid as much as they get paid. And so we almost use that as an anchor to ignore the support that those people need.
Yeah, but
And that
it's an
almost
anchor, or it's a safety net.
lead to collective negligence sometimes, isn't it, towards
Mm.
these people?
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm comfortable. I've got this net around me that keeps me in that place. So it's not broken, so I'm not going to change it.
Yeah, so I think it's important that if you're a leader, if you're an HR professional, independent professional, it's
Mm.
important to recognize and to be aware of this emotional pressure, the emotional workload that comes with what we do, how we do it, etc. To be
Yeah.
able to recognize when you need help, when you reach out to an accountability partner, when you reach out to a coach, when you reach out to a colleague who understands what you are going through, for them to be able to support you and to provide you with that safe space that you need to actually take off all your mask and then deal with whatever you may be going through at the time.
And this needs enlightened leadership. It needs reinforced HR to step in and support that culture of openness. And without that, it doesn't happen. And I'm pleased that over the last number of decades, this evolution of a better environment is so much stronger. And one of the environments I've always become a massive fan of over the last few years is B Corp in companies that follow that, because it's more than just an ISO tick in a box and everything else. It's about the cultural fit. It's about everything from the planet through to the culture, through to the individual, through to the setup. And it's a very much more powerful and enlightened workspace for everybody. And so the more of that goes on, the greater the cultural diversity that, and the more fun and enjoyment that both HR professionals, C-suite executives and graduates, or YTS, I've shown my age that I'll be saying things like that, but just those programs, the apprenticeship programs, yeah, neglect to invest in those individuals, and you lose future leaders of the organization.
Yeah, and that, thank you, Mike. That leads beautifully to my next thing. Who notices when you disappear?
That's the scary reality, isn't it? Because when you disappear and shrink into yourself, then suddenly it's not about extrovert, voluminous, lively personalities. But obviously, if one of those shrinks, then you know something is wrong, because suddenly the office is quiet. Somebody's turned the volume off on Mike. What's going on? But it's seeing that, and it just when you have a culture that is one of asking for support, then straight away the reverse of that is, I know I'm being challenged to ask more, but on the same vein, that gives people permission to just check in. And I know this is how we ended up our original podcast, but that whole ability to not text, not high five, but pick up the phone and ring somebody who your gut feel is saying, I should reach out and say hello. And I know full well in the last few months, because that story has been told numerous times, I picked up the phone to an old sports friend of mine, and he was literally just parked up on the side of the road, coming back from the hospital where he dropped his wife off when she was starting her first dose of chemotherapy. And he was in bits in the car. And the question was, why have you rung right now, Mike? And I said, I have no idea, but my gut feel said not to just do a text message, or just to pick up the phone and call you. And it landed at exactly the right moment, unrehearsed, no reward, no expectation, nothing like that. It was just the gut feeling. And that's what we as HR professionals, what we as business leaders, what we as human beings being human need to do more of.
Absolutely. And similarly, I think I tend to do that a lot in terms of especially when you get that feeling or someone's name is on your mind
Hmm.
all the time on a particular day or at a particular time, I pause, I take a moment, and I reach out to the person. And I couldn't tell you how many people and sort of really say to me, "You've got no idea what that means or what that meant to me." And it's quite interesting because I lost my dad last year. And
Hmm.
my friends, my school friends, my friends from secondary school, so we go back a long time. We got together after the funeral, etc., and then we're talking, and it almost turned into people saying, "Oh, Mary is this, Mary is that, Mary is this," and I thought that is quite interesting, and that theme really came out. And I don't do it for recognition, for appreciation, or for whatever, because that's just me. I would reach out to people, I would check on them, how are you doing, how are you getting on, and just check on them. And that just really made me realize that little things can sometimes mean so much to people.
No, and I'm a massive advocate of the little things in the background. Yeah, it's not about how many likes do you get on a social media post.
Yeah.
It's not about how many people can I shout about and do whatever else. It's the little things in the background. And I remember a friend of mine who was having some medical treatments, and he said one of the things I really enjoyed, and I didn't thank you at the time, was just your random nonsense messages. I just because I'd send him rubbish. I really would, but because it was just to remind him I was thinking of him.
You were there and you're thinking,
And when he was first diagnosed, yeah, I didn't take him flowers. I took him a 4 pack of Guinness and left them on his front doorstep and so on. It's just sort of little things like that. Well, okay, so it is about doing the stuff consistently in the background. We can say happy birthday to people, we can sing happy birthday to people, but we don't have to be doing it so everybody else sees what you're doing.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
because that means more to the individual if it's personal.
Absolutely. Right, Mike, thank you very much. It's been an incredible conversation, as always, very useful and very timely with mental health awareness
Yes.
sort of around the corner. And what are the top 3 tips that you would give to our audience?
Okay. First off is check in with yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I know that's an easy one that everybody always says, but it is that element of self-care. We have to be looking out for it, and we do have awareness of where we are great and where we're not so good, and waiting for a health crisis or a challenge or a provocation to come along before we take action is not going to enable us to have that full life experience where we're enjoying. It's going to make us uncomfortable. I spoke to somebody only recently about the couch to 5K. I'm not a runner. I'm a swimmer, not a runner. But it was that whole thing of just doing something. So the self care. What is the one thing as an individual that you are not doing that you've always said you could or should or want to do? And how are you going to change that from just being a wish list to an action? And generally, that means getting support or help, somebody who's going to do that. One of the things I will always challenge people to do is if you've got a particular charity you like, all right, we'll come up with the challenge and you say to that charity, okay, in October, I'm going to give you £500, $500, whatever it is for you. And I commit to giving you that. But my challenge to me is I'm going to fundraise to raise that money to get by doing this activity.
Hmm.
Now, if I fail to do that activity, I've still committed the 500 to you. So you're
Yeah.
going to get that. And now it's up to, I've created a trap for myself. So that's one of those ones. So self-care, number one. Secondly, is about the support people around you. I know we talked before about the negative people in our lives, the mood hoovers. Yeah, it's knowing who those people are that we need to spend less time with. But the counter to that is, who are the people in our lives that we need to spend more time with? Because they motivate, inspire, excite, challenge, and everything else. And life becomes so much more fulfilling when you spend more time with those people. They're the positive drugs to get you high on life, because they're working it. And the third one, which is always going to be the, who needs your help? Who do you need to pick up the phone to? It is that simple. Have a conversation. Within 24 hours of listening to this, pick up the phone and ring somebody that might just need your call today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mike. Very, very, I think, insightful, very practical, and as again, very timely. And for our audience, I would like to say you are closer to support, change, and clarity, as well as recovery, than you think. So please do reach out. And on that note, thank you once again for listening to HR Voices podcast. Please do share with your network, and would love to hear from you as to what you thought about this episode. Take care and speak to you again soon. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. Tune in next time.